Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I'm at a Saif Tawheed. I'm interviewing Ali, who's an ex-Shia, and he came to Ahlu Sunnah. So Ali, can you introduce yourself for the people?
Assalamu alaikum, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Ali, and in the course of the next few moments, I will share my story.
Inshallah, inshallah. And also with me interviewing Ali is
Assalamu alaikum, this is Alpar Salan. I'm here interviewing Ali alongside with Devin.
Mashallah, we got a co-interviewer today too.
Inshallah.
So inshallah, I'll let you start it off though, Ali, but tell us about your family background, what it was like growing up in a Shia family, and we'll just start from there then.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this wonderful channel and for this opportunity to share my story. I really enjoyed your story as well.
Jazakallahu khair. You're too kind, brother. Yallah.
So I hope that inshallah this channel grows and benefits many people.
Inshallah.
So thank you. May Allah reward your efforts, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So my family is originally from the southern part of Iran. We're from this place called, it's the province of Fars, and the name of the town is Lar, or Laristan as it's known. But I've never lived in Iran. My family, initially my dad, when his father passed away, it was common for the men of that area, due to lack of jobs and so on, they would go to the Gulf countries. So my dad moved to Qatar when he was only 13 years old. His father had just passed away, and he had to support his 6 brothers and 1 sister. So he moved to Qatar. He worked there, and eventually, he had his own business. He got married at a young age, and had a couple of kids. And you know what? He told himself that now is the time to go back to Iran. And so he did. He had a hotel. Basically, I'm kind of sharing extra details, but perhaps people can, enjoy the extra details. But yeah, so he had a hotel in Shiraz, and soon after, the revolution happened. The the revolution in 1979, where Khomeini came to power and so on. And of course, the hotel industry relies on tourism. But with this political upheaval, tourism went down dramatically. The business went down. So my dad said, "You know what? Let's move to Dubai."
Now, was your family supportive of the Iranian revolution? Were they pro-Khomeini or were they anti-Khomeini?
So my dad, ever since I was young, was not, he was against the revolution. You know what I mean? He was like, basically life was much better during the Shah's time. Yes, it wasn't perfect. I myself have my own views on, the Shah as well, but we'll leave that for another episode. But he was definitely against the revolution. That's why he decided to leave as well. And I will reveal, as I continue the story, I will reveal how, he was not just, against, he was against the whole ideology of the revolution and what they represented and so on, ideologically as well as religiously and so on. And we'll talk more about that later on. So, we moved to Dubai. I must have been around 1 or 2 years old at that time. And should I just keep going, or
the one question I have is, your father basically, he left Iran for the Gulf because of economic reasons, and he ended up going back to Iran afterwards. Would you consider your father, your family, to be a very patriotic family, or was your father making that decision based on other circumstances rather than just were there economic reasons behind the reasons that he went back to Iran?
That he went back initially, I think he just it was more about being close to family, going back home essentially. You know what I mean? Like, we're Iranian, let's go back home. My mom, of course, it was difficult for her living in Qatar at that time. Qatar. And, so she also wanted to be close to her family. And just wanted to go back, basically. So it wasn't really anything to do with patriotism and so on, just to go back to a place where, you have your own language, your own local culture, and wherever you feel more comfortable, basically. That's why they went back the first time.
Seems like, despite you not personally having lived in Iran, your immediate family was still very connected to Iran and very much Irani.
Absolutely, absolutely. My mom, sorry to interrupt you, by the way.
Of course.
My mom had, she's one of 10 kids.
Wow.
So, she has 4 brothers, 5 sisters. So, yeah, they're very close. Basically.
Cool.
So what was
Big
your first
connection to Iran.
exposure to religion in general? Like, forget Sunni Shia. What was your first exposure to just religion?
My mom, from a young age, my mom and dad really emphasized moral values.
MashaAllah.
Justice, fairness, being honest, and so on. I attribute that to, by the grace of God, to my parents raising me that way.
MashaAllah.
But my mom was practicing Shia, and at a young age, I didn't really notice any Shia elements. But like, for example, like I would see her fasting, and from a young age, I was like, "Oh, Mom, can I fast?" And she was like, "Well, you're too young. You're only 7 or whatever. Why don't you just she had this word like basically like, let's just do a little a cheating fast. You know what I mean? Yeah, you can drink water just to kind of get me used to the whole just to let me enjoy Ramadan with them and so on. But yeah, my mom wore the hijab, practicing, would read the Quran often. On TV, of course, living in the UAE at that time, the adhan would come on, they would, like it was emphasized from a young age. My dad, I remember, would play Abdul Basit in the car all the time. Iranians, for some reason, they love that style of recitation. Yeah, they love his voice. I till today, I love it as well, so yeah, there was, all our family friends, so I should preface saying that basically by the area that we're in, that we came from, the south of Iran, our village, even though it's majority, in fact they're all Shia, there are several smaller villages, if you want to call it, like towns, which are Sunni. That includes Khunj and Fishvar and so many others, so and they're very conservative.
I see.
So it could be because of the proximity to the Gulf, because it's like so close. But yeah, like they're conservative, they have conservative mindsets, conservative values, even till today, Yeah.
SubhanAllah, incredible. So it seems like growing up, you were exposed directly to your mother, and that's pretty much the closest person you can be to religion, and you got a taste of Deen as you're growing up, and it's really really something, mashallah, special that your mom, kind of taught you the fasting and taught you these different elements of Islam. And what was surprising to me was that your family listened to Abdul Basit, and because it's actually a Sunni reciter, and that's kind of an opening right there, is that it seems that even though you're it seems that such a beautiful style of recitation, it's like your family or maybe other people who are Shia, they didn't even consider the fact that this is a Sunni reciter. It's just a beautiful reciter, and that's very interesting point. One question I had: you mentioned there were small villages around your area that were Sunni. Are they also Persians, or are they a different kind of ethnicity?
That's a very good question. To be honest, I don't have any knowledge about that.
Sure.
But that's something worth looking into. Again, so we are considered Lari, and we have our own language that's a little bit different than Persian. It's different than Farsi. The other villages also have different dialects of our language. You know what I mean? So yeah. That's a very interesting question. The history of Iran, I remember even reading, if I'm not wrong, that at one point that area used to, was conquered by Alexander. Jews used to live there. But it's a very, long history. So that's a good question. I just don't have the answer, to be honest.
For sure.
Yeah. I can narrate the rest of the story if you like, or if you have many more questions, just feel free to, we're just having a conversation among friends.
So what was your first exposure whether it was in school or was it a family thing or something, that you realized that your family is from a Shia background and that there was like Sunni and Shia differences? When was the first encounter with that you had?
That's a very good question. So I think, Dubai is very multicultural. You know what I mean? In school, all my friends were of mixed nationalities. You know, I had Arab friends, I had Pakistani Indian friends. I had no Iranian friends. You know what I mean? We had some Iranian, like, family friends, where there were some people within my age, but like, it was just like a bunch of different nationalities all hanging out. Like, obviously at that young age, religion wasn't really discussed. The first time, I'm going to narrate the story of how I even got into kind of deep into religion, and then it'll make sense. So, do you want me to?
Please.
Inshallah,
do that?
inshallah, inshallah.
So, it wasn't, where were we? We were talking about how, we had moved there, my mom and dad, like, for example, they would put on, we had Iranian channels at that time, which was also, if you look at the state-run Iranian TV channels, it's very conservative, all the women are wearing hijab, there's a lot of Islamic programs and so on. So I was just living a normal, regular life until I was 12 years old when something happened, basically, which turned me more towards religion. So before that, I was, try to fast, I would see, my mom praying, I wasn't really praying at that time, but just, I was aware of it. So when I was 12 years old, my dad's business went bankrupt. He had a couple of partners who were embezzling money. So the business was in his name, and UAE law, which of course was originally a colony of the UK, it had what's called a debtor's prison. This was a concept in Europe back in the 15, 14, 1600s, 1700s, where basically if you couldn't pay back your debt, the money that you had borrowed, you would basically go to jail. That was your punishment. Now in the West, for example, in America, in Canada, in Europe, you have what's called, you declare bankruptcy, you get protection from all your creditors, so that you can basically get back on your feet. We didn't have that in Dubai. So my dad's business went bankrupt, and the law was that you're going to go to jail for 10 years, you know what I mean? Yeah, for 10 years, which is incredible. My dad said, no way, I haven't done anything wrong, money was stolen from my business. I want to be able to see my family. I can't be in prison for 10 years. I mean, think about it, 10 years is a long time, right? So he went into hiding, and so began my journey. Like, I remember, like, we would, we'd kind of keep in touch. This is before cell phones, and we would keep in touch via, payphone or home phone. Like, actually, we were told not to use the home phone because, it might be tracked or bugged or whatever, because they want to, like, in fact, I remember waiting for the bus in the morning. A few times, like, cars would pull up and say, oh, by the way, where's your dad? We're a family friend, whatever. And they would be talking kind of like in an Arabic accent. And I've been told, I was trained, like, don't just say, I don't know, or I remember, like, in the heat of the summer, like, it was so hot that there was nobody in the streets, you know what I mean? Yeah. But there was this guy, like, just sitting outside our house, just sitting, Wow. It was clear that they were kind of like surveilling our house, waiting for our dad, to catch him and put him in jail or whatever, you know what I mean? Informants and this and that. So all of this I'm seeing when I'm 12 years old. And I remember the night that I was outside, I came home and I saw my mom, sitting on the kitchen floor. Our kitchen had a carpet, had carpeting basically, and she was reading the Quran, which was nothing out of the ordinary, because I had seen her read the Quran many times before. And I was like, hey mom, where's dad? And she was like, oh, your dad's gone to Abu Dhabi for business. And this too was nothing out of the ordinary, but I sensed that something was wrong, maybe from my mom's demeanor, from her her expression and so on. So over the next few days, my dad basically was not coming home. And my sister, the older sister who was married at the time, was coming over, and I could kind of hear them, whispering with my mom, just talking about my dad and so on. So I knew something was wrong basically, and yeah, sure enough, I found out that basically my dad's business had gone bankrupt. He'd gone into hiding, and everything in UAE, including schooling, requires money. Like there's no public schooling or whatever. So we had a really tough time financially. And it was this through my 12-year-old mind that I'm like, okay, I need to turn to God so that he can resolve these problems that we're having. You know what I mean? So I went to my mom and I'm like, Mom, like, can you tell me, like, teach me everything about the religion, how to pray, how to do this and so on. And so she taught me the, of course, the Shia version, of how to pray, how to do wudu. And there is a difference in Shiism. Basically, every little thing basically has a little different twist to it, The adhan is slightly different. The way you do wudu is slightly different. The way you pray is different, of course. And I'm going to pause for now so that if you guys have any questions, you can ask the questions and then I can carry on later if you like.
So I have to ask about this first though, is that what's the biggest difference in prayer? Did your mom used to pray in what they call a torba, which is like it's a little circle of clay that's supposed to be from the sand of Karbala that usually has Ya Hussein, Ya Ali written on it or something like this. Was that a common thing in your household?
Yes, that was very common. I should also say that from a young age, I do remember like my dad kind of like talking against Shiism, So I grew up with that also. But yes, my mom, when she prayed, she had that. I remember now going back to your question, which is the first time when did I notice the difference between Shia and Sunni? Because, in school I had Sunni friends. I would go over and, they would say, hey, why don't you join us in prayer? Or why don't you join us for iftar? Like, it was just never discussed, like, oh, you're Shia, we're Sunni, Like, I would, pray side by side to them, with my hands down instead of folded. Yeah. But they wouldn't say anything, which is, I think it's great because, I felt accepted. If someone had said, oh, you're a Sunni, my mom said, don't hang out. You're a Shia, my mom said, don't hang out with Shia, this and that. That would have kind of soured me maybe on the truth, the Tawheed, basically. But, so I remember, now I was 12 years old, my dad had gone bankrupt, and I was like, okay, I need to turn to God and start practicing so that God can save us from this situation. And I remember going for my first Friday prayer. And I remember, I think the mosque was maybe 10 minutes away, but because it was during a hot time of the day, cars would kind of stop and say, hey, do you need this happened throughout my life, living in the UAE. If someone knows that you're walking, a long distance to the mosque, they'll stop and they're like, do you need a ride? It's very common. Or especially during Ramadan as well, during iftar time, people will stop, hey, are you going home? I can drop you, basically, So there was this kind of generosity and goodness that you see in the society in the UAE. But yeah, I remember taking that, you call it the turba, we call it the muhr, basically, muhr. I took one of those with me, and I remember putting it in the mosque, and I remember getting some dirty looks. Again, I was 12 years old. I didn't even see other people my age at that time, but all these adults were kind of who's this guy? He's so openly praying. So I noticed something and didn't say anything. I went home and I told my mom, and she's like, well, obviously, because that's a Sunni mosque you're going to, you know what I mean? And subhanAllah, she had no problem with me going to a Sunni mosque because, there are Shia mosques in the UAE. At that time, there was just kind of a few, and they would get really packed and there would be, lots of cars lined up and so on. But yeah, it was too far for me, so I just went to a Sunni mosque.
I just want to add a quick note there. So when he's praying with his friends, because he's from an Iranian background, Persian background, it would have been implied that he's Shia. But also the Malikis pray what they call with sadr, which is when you have your arms down. So if you see some guy praying with his arms down, doesn't necessarily mean he's from the Shia madhab, by the way. So I just want to add this.
Very true, absolutely true.
So I just want to say, subhanAllah, the experience that you went through as a very, very young child was, absolutely, I would even say, even traumatic, to go through that. The concept of a debtor's prison is a, 18th century, 19th century concept.
Mm-hmm.
That and for you to go through that as a young child, feeling that weight on your shoulders, and especially when they had probably members of the police or Secret Service kind of trailing you to find your father, subhanAllah, that's incredible. But the one, I guess, fruit of that was that you turned towards religion as a very young child, at 12, 13 years old, which is very special for someone that age to turn towards religion and to recognize that as a solution. And of course, you being in your situation, I mean, what you did was obviously the right thing to do, and that was your circumstance that your family happened to be Shia.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like that was a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may have been calling you to, start a path, a journey towards Him, And what's even more, I would say, it just speaks to probably the innocence of a child, is that you found your nearest mosque, it was Jummah, and you up and went to it. And a lot of times, as you mentioned, within your own friendships, no one really considered or cared whether you were Shia. You prayed together and you were together. And I think that is something of goodness, because, it's not realistic to think that every person, whether they be Shia or from another sect, whether they're a young child or even an adult, have grounded, well understood positions, and they're committed, theologically committed Shia.
Mm-hmm.
They're born into a family. They're born from a certain country. That's what they practice, as they learn. And I think that if we are to engage with Shia people, we are to engage into maybe even a dawah or a conversation with them, we should keep that perspective in mind, that, or really with anyone, that they are coming from a specific situation. They are living their own life. And if we are to share the dawah of Islam, the truth of Islam, we have to be aware of that and respect of that not everyone is a committed theological, whether they be a Christian or a Jew or a Shia, right? So
100%. You make a beautiful point. I've heard this a lot throughout my life, like people say, well, Shias, they curse the Sahaba. Not once, my mom was a practicing Shia, basically, through and through. Not once did she ever, I heard her say, yeah, we should hate so-and-so, or hate that. Never, you know what I mean? Like, so, as you said, like, even the layman Shia basically comes in all, colors and sizes, basically. They could be different spots on the spectrum, basically. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's important not to lump everybody together. It's just, you see, let's say some 15-year-old Shia, and you think, oh well, I'm gonna hate on this guy because they curse the Sahaba. May not even be true. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, what would the Prophet do? You know what I mean? Like, how would the Prophet do dawah? How would he approach people? And, just through his character and through his wisdom and through his kindness, essentially. You know what I mean? Like, he wouldn't avoid them, right? He would go to them, hey, hi, or, for example, like, talk to them, so on. And then, of course, you be honest. You say, what I mean? But, so yeah, I'm totally against all this kind of, must hate and avoid. Well, then how good is your da'wah going to be? I mean, exactly. I remember Bilal Phillips, he comes into the story later on as well, but he has a course on his Islamic University website, basically, on the course on how to do da'wah, and he's like, how can you do da'wah to someone you hate? You know what I mean? Yes. Oh, no, we must hate them. And, well, how it's just, it doesn't make sense, you know what I mean? So, yeah. Thank you for bringing that point up, Arsalan.
Of course, exactly.
So can you continue with the story now? You went to Jummah, and then what happens after this now?
Yeah, subhanAllah, when I think about it, it's only through the grace of God that, why, at age 12, we're pretty young, and, I don't know about you guys, like, I was pretty... I wasn't that smart, for example, at 12
I don't want to get in when I was 12, then.
We'll leave that for another episode, maybe, yeah?
No. You're
Excuse me. But yeah, like, it had to be only through the grace of God, you know what I mean? Like, why would it enter my mind that, I need to turn to religion, to solve our problems? Of course, that's a very simple way to think about it. But yeah, it was definitely Allah, through his kindness and grace, that he kind of, was slowly starting to guide me. So yeah, I was 12 years old. We were having a very tough time financially. My mom, of course, also, she had a tough time with all of this as well. She was constantly worrying. I would see her sometimes crying, and to see that as a child, seeing your mom cry day in, day out, like worrying basically about my dad or about the future, what's going to happen to us. We need money to exist and so on. We got some financial help through one of our relatives, my brother-in-law. May Allah reward him. He really, he essentially paid for my schooling and paid for, so many things. He paid for the rent of our house and so on. So we ask Allah to, grant him every type of success in this life and the akhirah as well. Yeah, basically, life went on, and I'm slowly starting to learn. So I'm praying, of course, the Shia way, hands, on my side, and I have the muhr, where I prostrate on. And what I remember is, I would, of course, make dua, what I mean? So who would I make dua to? I was taught that I could make dua to Allah. Yes. I could make dua to Ali, to Hassan, Hussein, Fatima, may Allah bless them all. And that always that's the first time I started questioning. It's like, well, if Allah can grant me everything I need, why am I praying to all of them, basically, you know what I mean? Or for example, if, the person, whether it's the Prophet or Ali radiallahu anhu, and I'm praying to them, and how can they hear me? Essentially, that was like, it didn't make sense to me. So I had these questions, and this is kind of before the internet, so I couldn't really go and search for the questions. But I remember we went to this bookstore. It was very limited. I should also say that all these Friday khutbahs that I was going to, Friday prayers that I was going to, the khutbah was always in Arabic. So I'm just sitting there for, let's say, half an hour, 45 minutes until prayer time, and then coming home. So I think this might be still a problem in the Gulf countries or in the UAE. The khutbahs are in Arabic. I remember at one point, Bilal Phillips did introduce English khutbah at one of the mosques, but of course, again, it was far away. I didn't have access to a car and so on. So what happened was, I remember getting a translation of the Quran, basically. There was this kind of book expo.
Do you remember what the translation was?
I'll tell you. It was I went to a book expo where like different countries would come display their products, and they would display their products, and the Quran translation that I bought was from an Iranian seller. So I can't tell you what the translation was, but it was super beneficial, because for the first time I was reading the words of Allah. SubhanAllah. And what was Allah saying? He was like, if you want anything, ask me, worship only me. SubhanAllah. I'm all hearing, I'm all seeing, I'm all knowing, what I mean? So for the first time, my mind is opening, what I mean? I was like, wow, this makes sense to me, you know what I mean? I still don't know what this is called.
Incredible.
Until, some time later, Dr. Bilal Phillips, may Allah bless him, he had a, Islamic program for like 5-10 minutes called Contemporary Issues, which you can still, I think, find on YouTube. And it was coming on Sharjah TV. Sharjah is one of the cities in the United Arab Emirates. It's like 5-10 minutes away from Dubai. So I remember watching his program and hearing the word Tawheed for the first time, the oneness of Allah. And then that's when, like, it just, I was like, this is it. This kind of is going to solve all my doubts. You know what I mean? I should also say, like, before that, because I had doubt in Shiaism, because it didn't make sense to me to make du'as to human beings, to people who are essentially in the grave at the moment, and making du'a to, or asking, multiple people, including Allah and so on. I did, for example, look into other religions also, whatever I could. Again, this is before the internet. I remember meeting a Hindu person at the local club, for example, the exercise club that I would go to in our building, and I saw like, you know, Hindu scripture on the ground, and I asked him like, do you mind if I take a look? He said, no, go ahead. And I read some of that, and I remember what it was reading was not making sense to me. And Christianity with, of course, you know, Jesus being God or Son of God, that also did not appeal to me. So I did look at other religions also. And but it was not until the Bilal Phillips program where he mentioned Tawheed and me reading the English translation of the Quran, you know, where Allah keeps referring, you know, asking, you know, basically us to worship Him alone and ask of Him alone, basically, that it started to make sense for me, and I kind of started the journey into figuring out Sunnism, essentially.
So when it comes to, 'cause some people might be either confused about this issue. So did you make a dua to, let's say, Fatima directly, or is it like I make dua to Allah, then through the will of Allah, through the will of Allah to Fatima, or how did you think of this back then, basically?
Very, very good question, because you know, now you actually remind me, because you know, I was going to Shia mosques. I should say in my school there was a lot of people from Tanzania and Kenya who were of Gujarati ethnicity. You know what I mean? They were of Indian descent, basically. And a lot of them were also, you know, Ithnashari Shia as well. You know, Ithnashari meaning the ones who believe in the 12 Imams and so on. So a lot of them were Shia as well. So I would go to the mosque with them. I would, you know, go to their house and, you know, attend Shia programs, let's say, attend the Husseiniya.
Yeah.
And even myself, when I would go, for example, to the Iranian mosque, you know, for Friday prayers, and read some of the material over. I was always reading, basically. I was always, you know, seeking knowledge and so on. So there was two camps, basically. So I would say, like, oh, you know, how can I make dua to, for example, Fatima or Ali? May Allah bless them both. You know, so some of them would say yes. You know, you ask them directly. Others would say no. They're just kind of an you know, intermediary, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they have a higher status than you. Because they are without sin, you know, that's what they say, that they are without sin, ma'soom, that, you know, you ask them to go ask Allah on your behalf, you know what I mean? So there was kind of like, I was getting different answers.
So I want to also explain for people listening now, so especially Sunnis may be wondering, well, like Fatima, radiyallahu anha, you know, we don't believe in Ahlu Sunnah that these people are infallible, for example, right? So the biggest difference between the Shia or Shiaism and Ahlu Sunnah is the belief in a set number of imams. So different Shia groups like the Ismaili Shias, today you'll see some of them believe in 50 imams, with the 50th one still alive to this day, actually. And the one the brother came from is what you would call the 12er Shias that believe in 12 imams. Now, the difference, this is probably the greatest difference between Sunni Shia. Now, the thing with the imams is that they believe these people have knowledge of all the past and the future. These people are infallible. These people have knowledge of the ghaib that, you know, we wouldn't have access to. Not necessarily, I'm saying, equal with Allah, a'udhu billah, but, you know, more knowledge than the prophets, a'udhu billah, would have and stuff like this. So this would be what he's referring to when he says imam. Says I know the word imam just means leader, but they have their own, like, the Shia has their own special definition given to when they say imams, referring to these individuals.
Thank you for clarifying that. Do you have any questions, Arsalan, before
Yes, I had one question. So basically, when you were there in your salah, right, and you were in that situation, that position, did you, for a period of time, were you calling upon like Ali radiallahu anh, and then afterwards you kind of felt maybe sick of it in your heart and then started calling Allah alone? Or was it something, if you can remember, as almost immediate, like you grew up asking Allah alone, but as you learned more about Shiism, you learned about asking Ali radiallahu anh, and you started to do that?
No, it
Okay.
was the previous one that you mentioned, basically. So again, I was taught, you know, from the Shias around me that basically this is how you make dua, basically. You know what I mean? Yes, you can ask. I remember asking Allah also, but also asking, Ali, or asking Ali to go, on my behalf, basically, to present my dua, essentially, to Allah. So yeah, no, it was from the beginning. That's what I was doing, but it just immediately, like, there was a voice in my head, or it just didn't make sense to me for whatever reason. And again, this is God's grace, because millions of people do this every day, unfortunately, without even questioning it. So it's just Allah's grace.
One stepping stone that might be also was, did anybody in your family say things like Ya Ali, Ya Hussein, or something like this?
Very rarely. I would hear it from, like family friends, for example. I never heard my mom say it. Definitely not my dad, because, he was kind of outspoken against Shia ideology.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, how was your father outspoken on but what specifically was he outspoken in regards to Shiism?
So, it was basically the conversation between my mom and dad. And I was just basically observing as a child, So I'm just trying to remember a specific incident. Nothing comes to my mind right now, but yeah, it's just, for example, it was like the fact that basically, yes, I remember, like, there was some talk about, nothing comes to my mind at the moment, but inshallah, if anything comes, I will definitely let you know for sure.
So would you say your dad was more, what do you say, like, of a secular Iranian then?
So that's a very hard question to answer, because, there were times, when he was fasting, there were times when he was praying, but it was not, my dad used to work a lot, so he was out of the house most of the time anyways, you know what I mean? So I don't remember him. Like, I do remember him praying, for example. But I guess, again, you remember, so, like, age 12, he was essentially out of my life. I mean, he was out of the house. He was in hiding. We would go visit him, once or twice. And yes, I do remember him praying, but maybe not always consistent, or maybe not, like, asking me if I had prayed or was praying, you know what I mean? So it was that kind of a situation. Yeah.
So was it reading the translation for you of the Quran and English interpretation of the meanings and listening to Bilal Phillips was enough for you to find Ahlu Sunnah, would you say?
No. So again, I had gone on this kind of, like, mission, like, I need to figure out this whole religion thing. So I had looked into other religions. I was kind of reading Shia material, whatever I could find. I was, Shia books and so on. I was reading. I do remember, like, going to the local library. That's when I found. This came more after I had decided to become, a Sunni, basically. And all I did was basically I just switched. Okay, I was like, you know what? I just need to. Whatever I ask for, it'll be from Allah. You know what I mean? I remember, like, discovered 12 volumes of Bukhari in the local library, and that's when I started to read, you know what I mean? So slowly, kind of, my Sunni identity was forming. I can't say that I sat down with a teacher and he taught me everything in one go. Yeah. No, it was kind of like gradual, me learning by myself. Again, no internet, going to the mosques. Most of the books were in Arabic, so it was hard to find English material, you know what I mean? Bilal Phillips, he had an office in Dubai where they did da'wah from. Again, because I didn't have a car. Yeah, so it was just kind of like getting whatever I could, Yeah.
So, now, what was your, when it comes to Shiaism, so did you ever have any conception, obviously you would have known the Shia version of Ahl Bayt. Now, the difference between the Shia version of Ahl Bayt is they don't include the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, did you have any conception of the 12 imams, or was it more so of just Ahl Bayt that you would have known about, the Shia version of Ahl Bayt?
Both. I had the conception of the Ahl Bayt, and it's called, this is an Iranian term called Panjtan, which means, the five. Yes, and of course, it's represented by this kind of like this symbol of a hand. I'm
Yes.
holding up my, the palm of my hand basically with the five fingers up. And this, funny enough, this symbol that some people, for example, may wear as a necklace or as a bracelet, or they'll have like in their car. I've seen them kind of like, pinning it, to the crib of the baby. Basically, I just started noticing that, the people practicing Shiism around me were kind of putting their faith, in these objects, basically, whether it's the panchtan or, I think we mentioned, the green, thing that, some Shias wear around their wrist. Again, Shiism there's a whole spectrum, you have Shias from Iraq, from Pakistan, from Lebanon, from Iran, and they all have their own cultural, similarities as well as differences. Plus, also, there's a lot of different sects of Shiism as well, So, yeah, I just realized it just didn't make sense to me to put your faith in a inanimate object, because the Quran kept saying, worship me, I'm your protector, I'm your sustainer, Allah the ever-living is the one who, not an object, basically, can take care of that for you.
So you basically came to two realizations. The first realization you came to is that when people were making or seeking intercession through Ali radiallahu anh and many of the other Ahlul Bayt to intercede with them before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you came to the realization by reading the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was, telling you or ordering you to seek those things and making your prayers to Him alone. And from that guidance, you kind of left the practice of seeking intercession through the Ahlul Bayt. And similarly, when it came to seeking protection through these inanimate objects, you came to that same realization that through the Quran, that seeking protection should be sought through Allah alone. Is that about
That's
correct?
Exactly what you said. And also, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, I do believe they were like reading verses where Allah says, like those whom you're calling upon are dead. They cannot they cannot answer you, basically. Whether the verse was referring to idols or not, I'm not really sure. But yeah, so the righteous people of the past, they are no longer among us, they cannot hear us. So if 100 different people from all around the world call upon a certain individual who's no longer alive, can that person hear us? Of course not, Of course not. So Allah is the one who is all hearing and all knowing and all seeing. That's, we direct our worship to Him alone,
Inshallah.
which is, essentially it's Tawheed, What
Mashallah.
we need to learn all the attributes of Tawheed and so on.
This principle that you mentioned, this principle of Tawheed, of asking Allah alone, I think this is something that is beyond any sect, beyond even our religion as Muslims. This is our purpose, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us for. And this is something that all of humanity must follow and do as our fitra, as humanity, is to call upon and worship Allah alone, and putting all our power to Him. And I think this is a message that should resonate across the different, you can say, sects or division within Islam, is that, we can all come to this common path of seeking from Allah alone. And I don't think that any Muslim should have any dispute with that, is that we should seek protection from Allah alone. We should pray to Allah alone. And I believe that beyond throughout humanity, inshallah, that should also be a call. And on that note, it would be really interesting to hear your views or a message you would like to share with Shia brothers and sisters around the world that may learn from your experience or may benefit from your experience. We really appreciate your message on that.
Absolutely. Before I get into that, I do want to say that, we have to remind ourselves that, who are we? We are spiritual beings. We are souls, in a physical body, And every soul, I believe, from when they're born, they're children and growing up, basically they have these 4 questions. Where did I come from? Where am I going after death? Who am I? And what is my purpose here? Because we're all here for 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Some of us even less, There's some kids who are born and they die a few days later, for example, So life is short. Life is limited. as long as you can quieten your mind to an extent where you can, every soul basically, has those questions within them, you know what I mean? Where did I come from? Where am I going after death? Who am I and what is my purpose? You know what I mean? When you go towards seeking the answer to these questions, as you said, yes, naturally you will come to realize that this world had to be created, I can see you're wearing a watch, or you have a phone on you. Your phone and watch had a maker. So what about this entire universe? Of course there had to be a maker, you know what I mean? So yes, if there's a creator, then why did the creator put us here? Why did Allah, put us here?
The best example I've come up with, or one of the best examples I've heard about this, is that, look, let's say we all wake up in a house that's not ours one morning, right? And other people have woken up in a different location too, and you see people going to the kitchen, making breakfast, just like nothing's happening, right? Who would be more of a critical thinker? The person who woke up in this place and wonders, how did I get here? Why am I here? When they're trying to figure out the situation, or someone just, living their life in this new location as if they're just there, they don't question themselves though, right?
Absolutely.
So it's about, it's really about sincerity, I find, is everyone has these questions in ourselves, and the best thing we can do is not suppress these questions, but we got to find out the truth of what is our purpose on earth, what do we live for, and it's a blessing from Allah that one of the shortest surahs, Surah Ikhlas. I was watching a video by a Christian guy, James White, and he's talking about giving, Christian dawah to Muslims. And he said it's so hard to give dawah to Muslims because Surah Ikhlas addresses Tawheed so clearly. Qul huwallahu ahad, say that there's only one and only God, Allahu Samad. God is about, everything depends on God. God depends on nothing. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. God doesn't have children, whether it's the statues or something, or the Christian Trinity. And he doesn't beget children and such, and that there's nothing equal to God. Allah protects us from the number one sin of shirk in one of his shortest surahs, and highlights beautifully the attributes of Allah.
I think that's a really great point. And another great point that you mentioned is that these Ali, is that these experiences that you want to go through, these questions that you go through, these should create a sense of urgency in a person, whether they be Shia or of another religion, when they're asking these questions about their place in life, their place in the world itself. A lot of us may face different pressures, family pressures, social pressures, identity issues. Is that, look, I am a person from this background. This is my people's religion, so I don't want to abandon them and this religion. But a person, a human, has to look beyond that, and they have to look at themselves, if they are a believer, as a creation of God. And they have to understand that if they have these questions, God is giving them a message and they must respond to it. And this may be a very challenging thing for some people, but a person has to be very careful not to get swallowed up in that rhetoric. It's like, I'm of these people, this is my people's way. And if someone is in that situation, whether they be a Shia, and they say that, look, I'm an Iranian, I am a Arab Shia, these are my people, how can I leave them? How can I leave their way? How can I leave their... But you have to look at yourself as someone beyond that. You have to look at yourself as someone who is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have to follow what you believe to be the truth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided you to. And you have to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon this, and you have to seek protection from Him. And because one major mistake, or the worst thing a person can do, is know all this, learn this, have these thoughts and these realizations, as you discussed, Ali, and kind of just allow themselves to get swallowed up in this situation. That's one thing I think is very inspiring about your story, is that although you were a very young man, you still were able to, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, take those steps, those initiatives to go out and follow the path that you believe was the truth. And I think that could be a good lesson for anyone else in a similar situation as you, whether they be a Shia person who is having these same kind of thoughts and realizations as you are, is that help should be sought from Allah alone, and worship and dua should be for Allah alone, and you're trying to follow the right path on that. And if you're in the situation, may Allah guide you and help you and keep you steadfast and help you on that path.
Barakallahu feek, Alpar Salam. And by the way, we were talking, when we were not recording, about the origins of your name, which I think we should make a video on that as well. Who
Inshallah,
was a great Muslim warrior from the...
Yes, of course, about Alpar Arsalan. and also obviously all of us are doing this by pseudonym. We're not using our actual names here, and that's important. I think, to be honest with you all.
Except me, yalla, except me.
Okay, except you. Yeah, I think Devin has been clear with his name. But yeah, it's important. Alp Salan was a great Muslim leader. He actually defeated the Byzantine Empire, which is a Christian empire. Basically, it was in what is now Greece and Turkey, in the Battle of Manzikert, which is one of the earliest and the greatest Muslim victories over the Byzantines, which were a Christian empire in Turkey, and that led to Turkey being, you can say, liberated to or being kind of settled by Muslims at that time. So that's the origin of Alp Arslan, and of course I'm nothing like him, but that's our pseudonym.
Don't be modest, but yeah, subhanAllah, we have such a wonderful history as well. That it's a shame that unfortunately I did not know this, for example. You know what I mean? But yeah, going back to your original point, yes, sometimes we just do a particular ritual or have a particular belief just because we were raised in it. You know what I mean? The Quran addresses this as well. Like we found it quotes the people saying in the Quran, basically saying, we found our ancestors doing this, our forefathers doing this. You know what I mean? Well, I would urge anyone, we talked about the 4 questions. Do you guys remember what it was? Where did I come from? Where am I going after death? Who am I? We said we're a spiritual being having a physical experience, in a physical body. And where am I going? And what is my purpose? You know what I mean? So seek the answer to those questions, and also question your beliefs. Yes. You know what I mean? Why am I doing this? Why do I, for example, and I hope I don't want to offend anyone, but there's a lot of religious rituals that you see that if you truly think about it, it does not make sense. You know what I mean? We're not going to name any. But so question your beliefs, and I would say read I want to give a true, sincere message to my Shia brothers and sisters, because wherever you are in the world, I care about you. In fact, not just our Shia brothers and sisters, anyone who's listening here and who's sincerely looking for answers, whether you're atheist or not, you're lost, you're agnostic, and you're looking for answers truthfully and sincerely. I hope that I ask Allah to guide you. Question your beliefs. Why do I believe this? Even though it doesn't make sense to me, is it because it's a belief passed on from my forefathers and ancestors? Second, I would say pick up a copy of the Quran in your own local language. You know what I mean? If that's English, for example, and get a copy that I think, Devin, you mentioned that the Clear Quran.
The Clear Quran by Mustafa Khattab is my favorite Quran to give for dawah purposes. What I like about it is that it's very clear in the footnotes. It doesn't use you wouldn't pick this up, and of course, it does have more of a traditional Sunni perspective though, but it doesn't have anything that would it just makes what the Quran says very clear. Yeah. Inshallah.
It'd be great if you could link that in the description.
I can link a copy in the description, and I'll link an online copy. But you, inshallah, should be able to get these at your local masjids too.
What I found beneficial, because you gave me a copy, and jazakallah khair for that, by the way. What I found beneficial about that particular translation is that it doesn't have too much commentary. Basically, exactly, it doesn't have too much tafsir. So it's just mostly the Quran itself, basically. You know what I mean? So read a copy of the Quran in your own local language. Keep an open mind. If you truly, want to find the truth, have that kind of sincerity in your heart. And, when you're by yourself, in a quiet environment, ask, there has to be a creator, right? Turn your heart towards this creator and say, what, guide me, basically. And I ask that for, I hope, I wish success. What I wish for others is what I wish for myself, right? Which is, success, every type of success, whether in this world, in this life and in the hereafter, and the truth and so on. So question your beliefs, read a copy of the Quran in your own local language, think and ponder. This is what the Quran keeps talking about, right? Don't they reflect on so-and-so? Don't they think about this and the creation? And I hope that yeah, I hope that we're all reunited in the akhirah,
Inshallah,
in the
inshallah.
highest point of Jannah.
Allah. For the people of different backgrounds listening, yeah, we also respect the fact that in the Shiaism, there's beautiful stories there too. The emphasis on the martyrdom of Hussein radiallahu anhu, the emphasis on Ali, on Fatima, these are figures we love as Sunnis.
Oh, 100%.
We love these figures. These stories are beautiful stories. I mean, even in the Christian Bible, there's very beautiful stories we find in the New Testament and the Old Testament, though. But at the end of the day, we have to direct our worship to Allah. I sincerely recommend you come to a Sunni Jummah, and you'll find that the topic of the Jummah will be on Allah and His Prophet ﷺ being the best worshipper to Allah. Now, if you go to a Husseiniya or a Shia masjid, you'll find the topic is not directed towards Allah, likely. It's towards, Ali or Fatima, which are very important, but ultimately, as we know from Surah Ikhlas, in the surahs you've learned growing up, that ultimately we serve Allah and our purpose is to worship Allah in the dunya.
Just on that note, I mean, I'm Sunni from a Sunni family through and through, but I have cousins named Haidar and, named Hassan and named Zainab, and we love Ahlul Bayt, like, with all our hearts. And I think a lot of, because I've heard this, a lot of people who are Shia, they are concerned that they are leaving the love of Ahlul Bayt, but when it's not that at all. It's you will be able to reinforce your love of Ahlul Bayt, but in the correct way, without exaggeration, but with, I mean, a person who can name their children after something, they love it more than, they love it so much, because people love their children more than anything. So if you name your child something like Haidar, it shows a great love for that. So please don't think you're leaving love of Ahlul Bayt, because we love Ahlul Bayt.
100%.
She is just, you have to realize that somebody saying coming to Ahlu Sunnah is abandoning Ahlul Bayt is the same as the Nasara or the Christian saying you don't love Jesus because you're not a Christian.
Or you're leaving Jesus.
We're not leaving Jesus, but we're putting Jesus alayhi salam in his rightful place.
And we will love him more because of that.
And we love him more as we understand the truth about him now. So don't think of this as we're demoting or we're putting it aside, we're throwing away Ahlul Bayt.
Never.
But you can have Ahlul Bayt, you can have the beautiful stories of the Sahaba, you can have the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the access to the best of tafsirs of the Quran of people who master the Arabic language, and inshallah this is beneficial to you, and bless everyone who listens to this.
Yeah. And I wish, I think that would be a great episode by itself to do as well, to dispel any misconceptions that our Shia brothers and sisters may have about Sunnis or Sunni beliefs.
Yes.
So if perhaps you can do a poll on online, see if there's any interest,
Inshallah,
and if there is,
inshallah.
we can make another episode, have just a light chat. None of us are experts here, by the way. None of us are scholars. We're just trying to convey. I'm just trying to convey, as you guys are as well, basically.
We're basically just Muslims with a love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and His religion, and included that, of course, is love of Sahaba radiallahu anh and Ahlul Bayt. And we invite, and without any benefit to ourselves, we would love to, welcome you to this path where you can love correctly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Sahaba radiallahu anh, and of course Ahlul Bayt as well.
Yeah.
And I think that loving and understanding and learning the truth about the Sahaba is especially the wives. Well, this is considered Ahlul Bayt, of course, but the wives of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and giving them the respect and the love that they deserve more than anything. I think it's something that's going to be truly life changing for you, and you will, as Devin mentioned, have access to the lives and the stories and the lessons that many of these great Sahaba and that they imparted upon us. And I think if you were able to learn the truth about them, you'll understand how much they loved Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how much they sacrificed and strove in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and strove for the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how much and how truly they were sincere and of the best of people.
Yeah, that was a great point. And subhanAllah, we love the Ahlul Bayt, and they sacrifice so much for this deen, basically. And we have to ask ourselves, for example, who did Ali radiallahu anhu pray to? Who did Hassan and Hussein, may Allah bless them all, may bless them both, who did they pray to? Who were they asking for help, and who were they asking for protection? And I'm talking in the religious sense, of course. Yeah, like who were they asking for help? And they were asking Allah. the creator of the world.
Of course. And one other thing to mention, this, of course, probably deserves its own video as well, is that we know that, there were disputes that happened to the Sahaba. But what has happened to us now as Muslims is that we are two completely different sects. This is something that the Sahaba, and especially Ahlul Bayt, would never have wanted. They would never have wanted Islam and Muslims to be divided as such, that we are at different sects and sometimes at warring sects because one of us say that we love one party in this conflict over the other. They would have never have wanted that. And we should come back to respecting Ahlul Bayt and respecting the Sahaba, and above that, respecting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because especially Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would never have wanted this kind of division and this kind of warring, and we should strive to come back to.
The best way to come back to this is that these issues, whether Muawiyah and Ali, Yazid, Hussein, these are all issues that happened after Islam was codified. These are not the fundamental parts of Islam.
Exactly.
Read the Quran. I mean, Islamic history is so important to learn, but learn the fundamentals of Islam. Read the Quran. What is the spirit of Islam? And then afterwards, inshallah, you can go and learn the history though, but until you know the basics of Islam, I don't even think it's completely it could debatably be beneficial if you don't know, some of the basic things of Islam. Why would you read some controversial political issue that has nothing to do with your deen? So, in fact, I don't even like to dialogue on these issues. I think we got to come back to the foundations of Islam and then see through the light of the foundations.
Of course. I mean, striving to have the correct beliefs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran. This is something that's about our faith and our deen. And, of course, political issues is something that always causes a dispute, and we should try to avoid them and try to go into the focus on our faith. And the guidance that we get from the Quran is, of course, primary in that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you guys have any more questions, or if you want, I know this video has gone long enough, but it's up to you. Where do you want to take us, Devin?
I think, inshallah, it's good for today. Wallah, I hope Allah blesses all of you and your families who listen. Those who don't listen, I clicked away after 2 minutes.
Allah bless you too.
And yallah, we'll do another videos on in Shiism. I'll do more. My next episode in the series of the Bible in Light of Islam is on the historical development of the Trinity. But inshallah, hope we did something beneficial for you. We appreciate so much. We're just guys talking to our iPhone.
Exactly.
We don't have high-tech cameras. We don't have golf money coming to us doing this.
Yeah, we're not on petrodollar.
No.
We wish we were, but we're not.
So until some of those dollars flood in, we were stuck with this for now. But alhamdulillah, we enjoy it so much too. Even if only 10 of you listen, we'll still continue to make these because we enjoy it so much.
Absolutely. And I would say, subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, but also comment in the comment section below and tell us what else you want to hear, for example, what other type of content you want to see from this channel. So, please do that.
And inshallah, that'll be enough. This is Sayfa Tawheed. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Barakallahu feekum.
Ya Allah,